and welcome to Shelf Center. This is Bryce. Thanks so much for stopping by. Thanks for liking and subscribing. If this is something you're enjoying, you never know. It could happen. Did I even say words there? I don't know. Hey, this is my top 10 for the year so far. This is a good, good time to just take a look back at all that I've read. Now, I do have some rules for this, and a couple of them I'm breaking a little bit, but right off the bat. But mainly, it can't be rereads. That just seems just unfair. Like, clearly, I'm rereading it for a reason. So I did reread The Lord of the Rings earlier this year, and so that's not going to get on the list here. And I don't think much else, but otherwise, it kind of dominated the list, so it's not fair. The other thing is, just in my bid to kind of include more books if I could, I did kind of combine. If I mentioned one series and I read multiple and they fit into that level that I've put it at, I just kind of grouped them all together. So you'll see. It happened a couple times. But not too many times, just the twice, okay? So anyway, let's jump into it at number 10. Number 10, this one was recommended to me by many, many people, and so I finally read it, and it was just as good as I thought it would be. A little, if a little dated, which is fine. You gotta, give credit where credit's due. Especially, so it's easier to notice in a non-epic fantasy book, whereas in an epic fantasy book, things don't really get dated all that much, other than some of the tropes and some of the themes, and anyway, but not necessarily like technology. Technology is very easy to date, but Sandman Slim, it's a rollicking good time. It's a good urban fantasy, lots to love about it. Good kind of quippy main character, which you kind of have to keep things fun and energetic, and this had it all. So I am really excited to read more by Richard Kadrey. So here we go. Number nine, we're going with someone who I actually will probably mention again on this video, but this is More Than a Vampire by J.R.R. Carroll. I absolutely had a blast with this. Speaking of energetic, this was just so much energy into this narrative, so much fun into kind of combining actual historical events with like vampires, and just supernatural creatures. Really fun to take a look at, and again, just pushed along by this just energy that just made it a blast to keep reading. J.R. Carroll is just a great guy. Been on his channel many times now, and so we've gotten along quite a bit. Number eight, I'm going with Saint Elspeth by Wick Welker. Wick Welker has quickly become just a favorite of mine. With his just kind of like hard-hitting fantasy and sci-fi, but this is more of a sci-fi dystopian kind of book with an alien encounter, and so it's really, really good. Really enjoyed it. Just realistic in the fact that follows a doctor, a medical doctor, and Wick Welker himself is a medical doctor, so it definitely got the realism there, but then some just great events and some compassion that just blew me away. It was so good. So anyway, highly recommend that one. All right, I finished up The Witcher this year, so this one's going to be a Witcher entry. It's actually not this one, but this is the only book I had on hand. But Time Contempt is pretty good too. But I think I read that one last year, I want to say. But Season of Storms, which is more of a prequel short story collection by Andrzej Sapkowski. Sapkowski just can make short stories sing. He has a gift, and I feel like the more that I love his short story collections, the more I kind of see that the bigger narrative books, not the least of which is this one, it kind of is more like a short story collection still, even though they're more tied together. But his short story is really where he shines. And this is no less than, I struggled putting what's my favorite Witcher book, and when I did a tier list, and this one's up there. This one's high up there, and you can see the rest of my list here is just insane. And when the Season of Storms is only number 7 for the year so far, I mean, I don't know how the rest of the year is going to go, because it's going to be rough to beat the rest of these. All right, this is the first of these that I mentioned that I said this is going to have probably a couple, because I did read a couple this year. I only read 2 of the 3 in the trilogy, but The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, book 3 in the Mistborn trilogy. Mistborn, the first era, as they call it sometimes. This is some of Brandon Sanderson's earliest published work before, it had like 30 or 40 books on the list in the front. But I put this. I also read The Well of Ascension, also great. Absolutely, and kind of went back to back on these. I'm realizing I need to stick with my trilogies. Don't just like squirrel other books in between. Need to focus, and this one's good. This was not my favorite of the trilogy. Mistborn, the first one, is still my favorite, but this is actually my second favorite. Second, I still favorite though. But I absolutely had a great time with this conclusion, and it wasn't exactly what I kind of expected it to be in a good way. And I won't get into spoilers from there, but the magic system, as you well know, Sanderson's obviously known for magic systems, but this is just, with the metals and everything, it's a really cool magic system. And half of the fun of reading is literally just seeing the magic system played out and seeing how it's used, because it is used. It just fills the pages, and I love a good fantasy that just, would you call this high fantasy? I think this is high fantasy, because it really, really depends on the magic system, a lot of what's going on. It's kind of a mix, epic and high. Anyway, I don't know. There's a distinction there. It's a fine one. But I absolutely had a blast. Sanderson, obviously, not the last you're going to see on this list, probably. But like I said, if this one is number 6 for the year so far, again, it's been a good year, okay? Then I finally caught up, for the most part. I think I just have a short story collection to go, but I caught up with my Joe Abercrombie. So number 5 is going to be The Trouble with Peace. That was my favorite of the Age of Madness trilogy. I did read the whole thing, had a great time on Grace Dion's channel with Overly Average Ben, Murphy Napier, and Ben's roommate. He doesn't have a channel yet. Let's hope he gets one, because that was really fun. Great just time getting to just talk about such a fun series with, as Abercrombie does best, characters. As much fun as and great characters as like Sanderson has, this is so dependent on the characters. You just really, really go in for these for Abercrombie, for these characters, and they're just well done. And as much as Mistborn is lots of magic, Abercrombie is low magic. There's very little in it, and it absolutely it's splendid. It's just so fun, and it's nuts, and it's just crazy, and it gets you deep in your soul on many levels, and it's appalling on many levels too, and it's just crazy. So I absolutely had a blast with it. All right, this is one where I did read this. It was a buddy read, and it was J.R. Carroll and Sarah Reed's, and it was a really fun conversation. I think it took us an hour to finally or 50 minutes of our hour to even finally start actually talking about the monster. But this is number 4, It, by Stephen King, and there's a reason. It's one of people's favorite books, despite some of the very questionable scenes in here. So that's the crazy part to me, is that it still remains people's favorite, despite, just some of the questionable language in here, especially for modern times. It's hard to take, and it's almost like you're so wrapped up in these characters' lives, but it's rough. Anyway, but at the same time, you're so wrapped up. It's King doing just real life so well, and especially kids. Somehow he's just got that tapped in where I don't know, I could see myself in here in the Losers Club and hanging out with these kids if I were so lucky, because it's just such a cool club here that he just makes you feel part of, and you just get drawn in, and then a good monster, and the idea of a haunted town, as only Stephen King can do. All right, speaking of, I actually did another recording with the same group as earlier for the Age of Madness for this one, but this was The Republic of Thieves. Absolutely blew my mind. Scott Lynch, I will say this is probably my least favorite of the 3 books in the Gentleman Bastards series, but it's all S tier, but so barely below each other, because this is just as good, really, as the first 2. I just like them a little bit more, but some of this is just, it's such good plot, it's so clever, it's got great characters that you fall in love with, and then you struggle with. And so it's just so many good things going on in this book, and then just some points of just sheer hilarity come out, and you're just like, how does this happen? So some of the funniest, some of just the like greatest plot, but also great characters. So just Scott Lynch, just one of my favorites for a reason, and has been for a while. This is just, it's on the same level. And I know like the sequels to Lies of Locke Lamora always kind of get like a little like, I don't know, there's like some kind of, I don't know, struggle that people have, but I get, because I feel the same way, that they're not as good as, or they're not my favorite like Lies of Locke Lamora, but they're up there, they're on the same level. So at least in my opinion, I don't. It's easy to kind of, I guess, compare to what you've had before, but comparing to all other fantasy books, this is right up there too. All right, these last two were very recent reads, in fact, in this month, and this will probably come out actually before my TBR/monthly update video that will talk about them. But this was a blast. This is one of my favorite authors, Susanna Clarke, Piranesi, #2 here. Piranesi, I mean, I was up late into the night. There's a cool mystery here, and I can't recommend enough to go into this as blind as you can. I was recommended that by multiple people, and I will say the same. Don't know about it if you can, and just try to go in blind. Susanna Clarke is already one of my favorites with Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and I absolutely love it. And this is, it's so different. It's so completely different, but the writing's still excellent, still, and it's getting made into a movie, so how cool is that? There's a reason for that, and of course it makes sense after Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell becoming a BBC show, but this is so good, and it's doable. It's not as thick as Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and I don't want to give anything away really about it. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to review it, because it's just, I don't know, you're kind of like going along and you're like, this is interesting. And then you get about halfway and you're like, okay, I'm seeing some things. I'm concerned. I have some thoughts here. And then you're from there, you're drawn in. You like cannot put it down. And it's so good. So anyway, can't recommend that one enough. Like I said, I don't know how the rest of the year is going to even get here. Gonna get to this level. It's crazy. All right, for my #1, I did mention there was another Sanderson. You probably know what it is. It's going to be Oathbringer. I have been reading this it took some time. It's a healthy chonker, right? And it's so good. It's not, I would say Words of Radiance, like a lot of people say, is the best so far. I still have Rhythm of War to go, and then, I'm going to be right on track for Wind and Truth, coming out later this year. But Oathbringer is really good in the fact that you get a lot more Dalinar, and a lot of stuff going on. It does kind of, I don't know, I don't want to get into too much spoiler or anything like that. I think I'm putting it as #1, but I'm still going, it's not my favorite of the Stormlight, but it's so good. That's how good it is. It beat out all these so far, which is insane. But it's not my favorite of the Stormlight, because it did feel like there's a little bit of like kind of side questiness. Like it kind of felt like kind of somewhat of a side quest that goes on that becomes more than that. It's so good. It's so cool to like see the magic system. Of course, I know, and not everyone loves magic system, you call it that, but the magic in it is just, it's really, really well done. It's really well explained. Especially when you watch like interviews that Sanderson does, like he knows this world so well inside and out. It is impressive, especially because he can easily keep up with the geeks and nerds that are asking him questions about random stuff, and he just easily is able to, I feel like a lot of authors might just be like, I just kind of made that up. What am I supposed to do? Whereas he's like, oh yeah, that matters because this, and this, and that. Or I can't talk about it, but, you're on the right track. And, and so they like, he almost like speaks that same language. He speaks the language of nerd. But it's so like, there's so much detail. There's so many things that you just, getting to know these powers and these different orders and all these things that are all happening, and lots of good surprises, Great Sanderlanche, but like I said, not my favorite of the Sanderlanches. I think I even like Way of Kings better, but it's still good. It's still up there. Like I said, it's the top one. It's hard not to. Part of this is I'm wondering if there's like some recency bias. I will admit that recency bias is probably playing a little bit here, but it's just hard not to just love a book that you've committed this much time to, because it's a lot. But with these characters and this magic, and there's just so many great things going on, and it doesn't, even for like a 1,200 page in hardcover book, that you just don't, I don't know, at least for me, I don't feel like you're bogged down, you're not slowed down, you're going each thing, maybe a little, if I can say, if anything, maybe in the interludes a little bit. I experienced that with Words of Radiance too, so where you're just kind of like, all right, I got to get to the next thing. I'm dying to find out what's happening with so-and-so. But other than that, and those are short, but it's just, you keep going, you keep pushing through, because you're just like, each thread is amazing. Like I said, some big reveals here that I was like, I don't know. I suspected at least one of them, but not all of them, that's for sure, not even close. So anyway, good stuff here. Absolutely a blast. Great year so far. I don't know how the rest of the year is going to compete. I'll try, though. I'm not going to stop trying. So anyway, thanks so much for stopping by. Thanks for liking and subscribing, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.